All right, Kim, it's all yours.
Okay. I will share my screen, though there's not really that much on there. Where is this?
Sure, at the bottom. The little green arrow.
But I have so many tabs open that that's the biggest problem. You can see this thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's basically just this part. So I'm just gonna walk you through it. Just shout when it doesn't make sense or when you say we already have that stuff. So from a data perspective, and I think I already am thinking about stuff I'm forgetting here. So data, well, you probably even have a data set that encapsulates different data blobs, and each of those data things has a category and a type. I made a distinction here because I can see that you have broader categories and then more specific types within that category, depending on whether you need it or not. What I don't have here yet, I think, but what might make sense is to also have like classifiers, like sensitivity of data, as you have from a security perspective, saying that this is like classified internal stuff. I'm gonna write this down so I don't forget it. Oops, I don't know what that is. What did I do? What is that? I don't know what that means, the blue stuff. Then from a personal data perspective, there's going to be data subjects. So who are the individuals that the data belongs to? Not in an ownership kind of way, but this is medical data about a patient, or this is information about whomever. And that's something I got a bit inspired by the work from Ethica. They have this open source taxonomy on privacy, where they also have the sort of this classification. They have data subjects, data categories, and in one of their blogs, I also found the concept of data qualifier, which means that you can also specify the level of de-identification. So you can just have, this is medical data, or you can have, this is de-identified medical data, or this is pseudonymized medical data, or this is something in between. I'm not entirely sure on these specific attributes yet. But so this is the stuff I copied from what I found on the FIDES or Ethica website. But I think it might make sense to have something, as it's probably already a control, but it has an impact whether you have pseudonymized medical information or identifiable or identified information. I guess this is probably also only useful from a personal data perspective. The purpose of collection. So you use personal data, you bring it into the system, and you do that because you need that for a specific purpose, whether that's marketing, whether that's just some specific business reason. Ideally, you document that, and that should then be always in line with the purpose you have for processing. So when you actually use the data, then it should be in line with the purpose that you originally collected it for. Because especially when it's consent-based, the individual consented on using it for a specific purpose, because a consent is purpose-specific. So you need to make sure that those are, well, compatible, and you don't use it for other purposes. A retention period, I think it's useful also for not personal data. A legal basis probably is only useful for a personal data perspective. Then for processing activities, and I need to think this through further, because from a GDPR, DPIA, record of processing activities perspective, processing activities can be quite broad. Sometimes it's just a whole feature or a whole application that has just one, is considered like one block of processing activity. So I'm not sure whether it's useful to tie this to each individual process or data store, or maybe it can be a level 0 or a level 1. I don't know if we're gonna do like different levels of DFDs or of architectural models, but those ideally also have processing purposes and links to these data items. So you have data. I was thinking we describe the data separately. I don't know, because the data will come back at different places in the system. So I can see links to that data at the different processes, at the data store, at flows going in and out of the system. And then checking, for instance, whether that's compatible with the original purpose and those kind of things. If you know how it flows through, you can also analyze the linking and the re-identification and all of those things. And if you have all this stuff, you can do a privacy threat modeling exercise, but also the output can be used as the risk assessment part for a DPIA, where you basically need to describe the risks, well, the threats and the controls and some residual risk you have left. I can add some links to DPIA documentation if you like. And the model itself can also be used to extract to a ROPA, record of processing activities. That's also something from GDPR that as a company processing personal data, you need to have. So whenever you're processing personal information, you actually should have that processing activity in this register. And that's how far I've got.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I've drank from the fire hose, and this is
I know.
this is
I'll
awesome
I'll
though.
share it. So, do we have like a repository to put it on, or should I put it in Slack or?
Well, let's you can put it in you can put it in Slack if you like. I mean, if
Too
you
much?
what's that? No, this is actually great. I have some questions.
Yes.
Ethica, they're the ones that created the data qualifiers.
No, they have this whole taxonomy. Are you seeing my screen still?
Yep.
So they
Yeah.
have this taxonomy with data categories, data use, data subjects, and then more, well, yeah. So I didn't want to start just from scratch, so I thought let's use something that's already there.
Yep.
So they have labels and elements. And
Are there existing definitions? You have identified, identifiable, synonymized, etc. Are there
so this is also
definitions for
stuff
those?
I stole from them.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Do they define them?
So I saw it somewhere here in their in one of their examples of a policy that they used like different descriptions of qualifiers, and it gets more privacy friendly the further down you get, I think, but I couldn't find much documentation. I can reach out to them.
Okay, so Ethica is a commercial company, it looks like, right?
Yeah.
That has solutions for privacy.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Got it.
I would under data categories probably change biometric fingerprint to something like cryptographic primitives, because it's not just biometrics that's there, but just also exposing something like credentials or cryptographic keys. Also in that list, you should probably include unique identifiers. So there are things like,
But,
well,
About,
like
are you
that.
looking at the website or,
No, I'm looking at yours, right there.
and
Like,
which ones? Biometrics?
like
Yeah, okay.
biometric
Yeah, but
falls
so
under that
biometrics,
cryptographic.
yeah, biometrics can be a cryptographic key, but also from a GDPR privacy perspective, biometrics are considered sensitive information, and sensitive information needs to be handled in a more rigorous way from a privacy perspective. You can't just process biometric information. So it needs additional security measures, yes, but also, and that has that cryptographic key, whatever properties, but it also requires additional privacy treatment, so to say. So the fact that it's biometric or some other sensitive categories is also relevant from that perspective.
Is
So
there a,
you're saying they make a distinction between something that can't be changed, i.e. biometric, and some credential that could be changed, and that's where they make it sensitive or not? Is that what you're saying? I mean, that's the downside to biometrics. You can't change it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. That's definitely the downside. But no, there's also other sensitive categories of data that are probably changeable. But I think it's about religion and about those kinds of things.
Okay.
There's specific. It's in GDPR. I don't know it by heart, but you have
And-
specific categories of sensitive data that need special legal basis, for instance, before you can process it, that needs special attention, that needs more de-identification, special care. But yeah, I agree, the non-changeable biometric stuff, that's very scary and needs to be handled with
Now,
special care.
there's one other data category, and that's unique identifiers. So like this guy here, an insulin infusion pump, right? Okay, great for diabetics. It advertises every 120 milliseconds, Bluetooth low energy, and part of that advertisement identifies it as a Medtronic Series 600 insulin infusion pump. So that means I don't know you, but I know what you are. You're a diabetic. Okay.
I was gonna say, yeah. Just being able to eavesdrop on that communication and see what it is, that's enough to deduce additional information. Yeah.
Right. You could literally have those in pharmacies, and as you walk down the aisle, a little, ticket would automatically pop out and say, here's insulin, diabetic blood glucose strips, discount kind of thing, because you can identify them remotely. So anything that's uniquely identifiable about that, I think makes it bad for privacy as well.
Yeah.
I did a search on biometric types because, I think of, facial and voice and, fingerprints and those types of things. And of course, it popped up with, iris and DNA and a few other things. There's a type of biometric called a heartbeat, whereby there is a um, heartbeat recognition biometrics, also known as yeah, I can't speak today, or heart-based authentication that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So
You
that
also
would count
like
too.
gait
Actually,
and lots of things I never thought about as something that is unique to people, but that can all be used to identify people. And not
my
just
favorites,
identify or like uniquely distinguish, but deduce your age based on the way you walk, for instance. That's yeah.
gate monitor,
Scent recognition. Interesting.
My favorite of biometrics is because it's changeable, is it's monitoring your electroencephalogram and it puts a picture on the screen. And each person, their electroencephalogram is different for each person, but it also changes with the picture. So that's why it's not locked to you like fingerprints. It is what is the picture and what is in there, and each one is processed separately. So it's like, that's very cool because that's changeable yet unique to an individual. So
Right. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at, right? Like the fingerprint is static, but there's also dynamic biometrics as well. And being able to track both of those is going to be important, I think. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
but
This
again,
is really
it
interesting.
depends on how deep you want to go with your privacy analysis, right? You can't just say this is medical or sensitive information, but of course, the more, as you say, the more specific you get, the more you can actually see like, wow, this might be a problem, or well, in this case, it's fine, or
Right.
yes, we use some kind of biometrics or medical information, but we're in this kind of context. So because we're in a hospital, we need this stuff, or well, we're using it and we're a social media application. Maybe we should not do this.
The purpose,
Mm-hmm.
I think, could also apply to non-personal data, right? I mean, if you're getting financial information about an organization, what purpose are we doing that for, right?
It
Maybe
kind
it's
of makes
vendor
sense
risk
to know
management.
that for all your information, right? I mean, you should only collect the stuff that you really
You would
need.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Legal basis, okay. Is there an enumeration of legal basis, or is that, are you kind of
There
like
is a
envisioning that as a,
limited set of legal bases, but then ideally you have some more details there. Yeah, but there is only a couple
okay,
of those. Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I'm talking about GDPR, so we probably need to have different variants there. I just focused on GDPR, so
Mhm.
we will also need to look into other legislations around the world to see if this list still makes sense. I mean, the instantiation can be different, but we still need to make sure that the overall structure still makes sense.
Right. And
Under the
retention
processing,
period. Yeah,
under
go
the
ahead.
processing activities, the Health and Human Services already has that as HIPAA. And I just set a link to you in chat to take you to that. That's what are called BAAs, Business Associate Agreements. And it says, how am I handling this privacy information? And you create what are called chains of BAAs, where you may be the collector of it, but then you hand it off to a processor, and they may have another company that does data entry, and they do. So that whole chain of relationships for processing activities is called out in your BAA. So that's an example of Kim's point of another regulatory agency waiting on this.
Yeah.
Mhm. And retention period, I mean, at some point, I mean, we should be able to support everything from, nanoseconds to, days or years, as well as just transient, right? Being able to say that this data is captured, processed in real time, but never persisted. Therefore, there is no retention.
Yeah.
Is there
Um,
anything we could say to summarize? It's captured, processed, summarized, and the summary is held in retention, but the data sets themselves are not.
hmm.
Wait, can you repeat that?
You capture the data, you process the data, it's summarized. The original low-level details are gone, but the summary still remains.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And then you actually come down to these data qualifiers because you have aggregation and abstraction, and you have different kind of de-identification techniques there that are basically applied that says that say we still have stuff, but not the original, not the full one. It might be summarized for a whole group of people, or it might be well, more generalized, that instead of having street and zip codes, we only have state now, or only zip code, or only specific things. And
This
you
is
actually
actually
have
this is
controls
actually a
that
big
say
topic in
after
the
3 months or after the retention period is up, we still want to store the aggregated form, but we're gonna delete the raw data.
retention periods of original data is a big topic these days in the AI/ML. And it's
Yeah.
like, and so that network that you're creating, that's the summary. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, can I, as we found out in many cases, can I go back and recreate original data out of that? And the answer most of the time is yes. So is it anonymized? You know?
Yeah, there was this recent statement, I think it was in California, that said that training models that have processed personal data are also considered personal data and need to be handled like with special care. And
I think that was the one that the governor of California did not sign. And so, yeah, And while he's a good guy, Gavin Newsom, I get his point. It's not enough, okay? And people are taking something is better than nothing, but, well, maybe.
See if you had a comment on retention period, or I.
Oh, no. I think, yeah, we discussed it. No, this all makes a lot of sense. I feel like I went through a data privacy 101 course.
But is this a bit in line with the attributes that that are
Exactly.
already
Yeah.
in SBOM, and that's because I should check with Ether and John what they have or have in mind for the stuff they are working on?
Yeah. No, this is perfect. You know, Cyclone supports data today. We don't have the ability today to to mark a lot of these types of fields. But I think the next step, at least for this part anyway, is to flesh some of these out a little bit more, like the data categories, flesh out the different types, etc., and then start applying definitions to those things, because each one of these words um, has a meaning. And as a standard, we need to ensure that we all agree on this word identified, for example, has this meaning.
Yeah, so I have been going back and forth on the instances of the categories and types and stuff. I think it might make sense to have some generic high level ones, but I don't know if we really would go into the really nitty-gritty details of each of them. Well, it's probably going to be a PhD project, first of all, but also people will still want to use their own descriptions or types, or I don't know. Well, we're going to standardization with this thing, so I know it might make sense to still have guidance there, but it's, yeah. I guess
Kim
we
is an
will need
expert,
help from the community there. Yeah.
Kim is an expert in this. Is pseudonymized and unlinked pseudonymized terms,
Yeah,
you know
that's
what they
also
are?
something I took from the FIDES thing. Yeah, you can have, well, I think pseudonymized, and pseudonymized is just replacing the identifier with some random thing. But that's typically used, so that's typically a reused random thing. So if you make it unlinkable, that means that you can still re-identify it, but within that same data set or across different data sets that are pseudonymized, you cannot link the data items together because they're all pseudonymized with a different ID. That's how I understood it, but I
Okay,
stole
cool.
it from
Thank you.
the website. So
Thank you. Yeah, that's a new terminology for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, the combination of unlinked and pseudonymization, I've never used that in combination before, but I thought let's go from something that's already out there. So
No, this is good. This is really good. Yeah, the types, I kind of agree with you. It's probably going to be a massive list if we actually enumerated everything. However, um,
yeah,
it might make sense to enumerate only the things that have um, only the types that have some kind of regulation around them, such as GDPR,
yeah,
and provide a way where if you want to have your own type that isn't part of that enumeration, you can do that.
that does make a lot of sense. So like the sensitive data categories, or yeah, that you can explicitly at least label them. So if we're talking about data subjects from GDPR perspective, um, saying that it's a child, that's also important because then there's some more. So yeah, okay, that makes a lot of
Interesting.
sense. Yeah, yeah. So I
That's
can
another
start.
concept we don't have. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
right.
I'll have a look at those. Yeah.
That long list you're talking about, there's the one for HIPAA, which I think I've sent this one to you before, but it's a pretty good list.
Hmm.
If you go down to right below that figure is 164514, and it's talking about safe harbor methods. And then it goes into telephone numbers, vehicle identifiers, fax numbers, device identifiers, email addresses, web resource locators, you know, the usual stuff.
Right. Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Okay.
And just to be clear, the FDA has said multiple times they don't believe that as defined HIPAA is strong enough. So they want to make it more
The FDA
strong.
said that?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
It's an ongoing bugaboo for them. And while it wasn't on their list of documents for the coming year, I wouldn't be surprised to see it somehow.
Okay.
Which is interesting because they're poaching in HHS. I mean, they report to HHS, and that's HHS is the one who does HIPAA, not the FDA. So,
Sounds like some political infighting that.
oh, isn't it? Always fun to deal with those folks.
Okay. All right. Well, this was very educational, Kim. Thank you, first of all,
Yeah,
for doing
well,
this.
I mainly hope that it's gonna be useful in the future, but
Yeah. No, we're gonna put this to good use. But yeah, I would like to expand on some of these things, maybe by our next call, and then um, and then, like I said, have definitions of some of these things. If we can derive some of these definitions from the websites that you've listed, or we need to, create, definitions, that's fine. And then we need to then figure out how, okay, I understand how this is going to be used from a privacy perspective. Um, is there any other details in here that we would also need from a security perspective? So we'll have to look at it with that lens as well.
well, I guess the classifier, I don't know, do you have something like confidential or internal? I mean, lots of companies use those different levels of classifiers.
Yeah.
That
We've
might make
got that
sense from an
already.
access
Yeah.
control perspective.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
one of the things I was thinking about, right? Is um, authentication and authorization to the data.
yeah.
Yeah. Who has access? When do they have access?
Yeah, and retention policy, yeah, or the retention period, I guess that's not really a security thing.
Yes and no. I mean,
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be one of those optional fields that nobody actually uses, but it could make sense,
well,
yeah.
like retention. If you start breaking down retention, and from a privacy perspective, you'd probably care about this as well. If something is being retained, well, is it encrypted at rest or not? If so, what are the details on that? So we could enumerate, we can go down the rabbit hole there. Um, and we support a lot of that today. We need to link some of these things up.
You mean like China's retention of encrypted information that they know they'll be able to break post-quantum?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that?
Another 10 or 20 years. Yeah, exactly. Like that. Or the retention of basically all medical records for, every American citizen for the most part.
Yeah, like that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
in the last year alone, either my mother or myself We've been involved in like 3 or 4 different breaches, all of which were healthcare related.
Wow.
Healthcare is the target, man.
Yeah,
It is the most popular target. It's the most money for record. So
yeah,
they all go
exactly.
for it.
Yeah,
Yeah. And now we see that Senator Mark Warner is weighing in, trying to get HHS to have more teeth for mandatory enforcement of cybersecurity in hospitals. Because right now hospitals don't have to answer to anybody. Medical device manufacturers have to answer to the FDA, but hospitals don't have to do anything. And that's why we have medical devices that are 48 years old sitting at that.
Mm.
I'm not kidding.
Wow.
48 years old. I mean, let's put it this way. That was something I may have made when I was 16. Okay. All right. You know, come on. I
yeah,
can tell you how bad that would be. Right. So they need to be able to enforce security in a way. And of course, privacy is huge there.
yeah.
It's interesting because in hospitals, there's an order to this. You know, we have the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Hospitals availability is the first priority, and
Right.
confidentiality / privacy is number 2. All right, and integrity is last. It's completely flipped from the manufacturer's standpoint, where integrity is everything. Okay, confidentiality is privacy is number 2. And then availability, heck no, we throw fatal errors all the time. We go, no, we don't know what to do. This device now shuts down. Okay. And it's like, okay.
Hopefully while
So
it's not attached to grandma.
all too often, I could tell you stories
Uh, uh,
without alarms and life support devices that, yeah, very common,
phenomenal.
very common. So
Processing purpose. How would we, let's see. That's kind of like a text field, I think. Unless we have an enumeration of something. I don't know what
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not really
text.
existing.
Yeah.
But and that's more at a feature level, sometimes at an application level. So I'm not sure how we can, either we need to tag it to each of the processes and data stores and or interactions, or I don't think we can like carve out features with separate purposes. I don't think that's an option here.
Yeah.
I just threw everything that I was thinking of on this thing. We can decide to not implement
Yeah.
everything.
No, I actually love everything that you've done. I'm thinking out loud here, but when it comes to processing activities, um, whether it's like a computer process, like software or whatever, or whether it's like a human process, business process, um, I know the context here is like software, right?
Mhm.
However, in a general sense, if data is being processed, theoretically, we could link that to the part of the threat model that actually does that process.
Mhm.
So we could theoretically capture that, which would be really interesting. So if the data, like if we're doing a threat model on one thing, and a small part of that threat model is in fact, um, data that is undergoing processing, well, whether that is represented in the same threat modeling document or in a separate document, we should be able to link to that, which would be really interesting.
Can you repeat
Um,
that?
yeah, so like if we're looking at a threat model, for example, say for example, I'm looking at it from a security perspective,
Mhm.
and I know that I capture some data, I process it, I persist it, whatever, and I'm looking at it from a security lens. Well, if I'm capturing the type of data, right, and the fact that it is being processed, I might want to, like, in a smaller, like very narrowly scoped part of the model, either within the same document or in a different document, I can actually link to that small, well, from my perspective, this is with a security lens, the part of the processing that could in fact be its own threat model. So if you're threat modeling like a business process, if you're threat modeling, oh, well, this is how we're actually dealing with that kind of protected health information, for example, right? So that could be represented as kind of a like an optional thing within the same threat model, or theoretically we could link out to a different threat model. For example, maybe the privacy team actually worked on that
Mhm.
aspect, right? So being able to ensure that you get the holistic picture, regardless of what team is actually working on it, I think is trying to what I was trying to
Yeah,
envision
yeah,
here.
yeah. I need to think about how the mapping goes, especially if you also would involve legal people. Their
Yeah.
understanding of the concept of processing activity typically doesn't like directly map on what we consider processes.
Oh,
They see
interesting.
it much broader. Um, but yeah, being able to in some way link it to this is that, yeah, that's
Okay.
a future thing, but it would be interesting to see, yeah.
All right, Kim, Chris, any where would the group like to go from here?
Well, I can work on those categories, for instance, from GDPR, and I can have a look at HIPAA too to see that there's already some specific data categories and data subject types, for instance, that have that specific label that we can include. And the definitions is something I will look into too. I'm not sure it's gonna be within 2 weeks. I'm also not sure whether I will be able to join because we have a fall vacation in that week, well, within 2 weeks. But I'll let you know. But yeah, no, like I'm gonna work on it. I hope within 2 weeks, but it might be within 4. Um,
Very good. Would it be possible to share this document with us?
sure. So how I just upload it to Slack? What is the easiest?
Um, the easiest probably would be to you usually have like a sharing thing at the top somewhere. This is a Google Doc, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You usually have a sharing option, and you can add Chris and myself to it. You don't necessarily have to make us editors, but at least at least the ability to comment would be good.
Yeah.
Um, and it's up to you, but you also within Google Doc, you also have the ability, optionally, anyone with the link can either
Yeah.
have no access, or they can just view it, or they can
Yeah. Yeah.
comment on it, or whatever you want. So,
Okay.
um, but that would be good. I'm gonna play
So
around. What's that?
so Steve, you asked about, where you think we are, where we're going. Kim's terrified me. So, and I say that
Chris
because
is gonna hide in the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna
I'm in
say
the
it's
fetal
like
position.
hiding in a cave somewhere.
No, because we're talking about threat modeling writ large. Privacy is one, I won't even say minor, one player in threat modeling. Okay. And just to look at this, quote Kim, this could be a PhD project, and it sure could.
I know,
Okay.
yeah.
And so when we back up and say back to the threat model level, that 20,000-foot view of it, I'm terrified now. So thank you, Kim. Really do appreciate that.
Well,
If we
enjoy
have
your
one
sleep
aspect
tonight,
that
yes.
is this complex, and yeah, I mean, just processing purpose. Take that one bullet. We could riff on that for a year.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's
and that's
it
just
only
one little
gets
part.
easier from this place onwards with yeah. All the rest is
So,
gonna be like a walk in the park.
so Steve, I think where I would suggest we are is back up. What do we know? Where do we have for a threat model? Where do we have coverage? Where don't we? where do we want to go? Where do we want to parking lot it for future? We know there's something here, but we just can't look into that dark hole right now. And I think we should try to map out where we are, what we have, and what we're missing, and what we want to do.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, this is big.
I tried to do a little bit of that in a Google Sheet. I don't think anybody really contributed to it much. I
It
was
was the use
trying.
cases?
No, I had well, I have the document, right? That's the use cases. But then there was a spreadsheet that that I was also working on where I was starting to capture the types of data that all the different threat modeling tools supported.
Oh, I think
You
I
know,
missed that.
if one of the use cases is essentially interoperability between all the threat modeling tools,
Mhm.
we kind of need to make sure that we can represent at least the majority of the data supported by each of these tools. So where is that? I need to find that. Let's see, where'd that go?
And weren't Isa and John working on something too? I'm not
I
entirely
think they
sure
were
what.
going to do some prototyping or something. I'm not sure. Um, I am also going to start between now and next meeting. I also want to start at least prototyping what theoretically we could, use as kind of a starting point. Um, Knowing without regard to what's currently supported in CycloneDX, we're just modeling essentially in JSON what we believe we need to support the overwhelming majority of use cases and data that
Mhm.
we need to support. So I'm going to start working on that as well. Um, I'm trying to find um, where did that go? Here's work streams, threat modeling. Um, is this it? Yeah, this is it. See if you can get to this document right here. I'll put it in the chat. I started this. And I haven't really revisited it since. But again, I was starting to capture the different types of data that the different tools supported. Irius Risk, Davichi,
Mhm.
Threat Dragon, um, ITM, those types of things. So, um,
Also, something interesting from a privacy perspective, if we can in some way capture the context of the project or maybe even the organization domain, because the example I gave before, are we talking about a medical application for a hospital, or are we talking about some sketchy social media app? The
right.
impact will be different. So that's something that's not here because it wasn't about data, but that might be something like more overarching. Oh,
Yeah, there's this one of the things that I found really interesting is that if you look at like I'm just going to pick on Irius Risk real quick, but if you look at like Irius Risk, um, everything ends and begins with the diagram. And then if you look at like something like Fork, which is a product from Versprite supporting the pasta methodology, they actually start much more basic than that, right? Like including the use cases. And your example, like, well, is this going to be used in a medical context? Well, being able to capture that, yeah, that's kind of important. Um, so yeah, completely agree. Um, So if you haven't used these tools before, I would encourage you to reach out to the vendors. I know Fork, for example, you can run it for free on a limited basis. Davici the same way. Irius Risk has a community edition. Threat Dragon is open source. PyTM is open source. Microsoft threat modeling tool is free. I haven't used that in a long time though. I don't have a Windows machine though, so
I have it open right now, so
yeah.
it's literally on my other monitor here. It's like,
Okay. Yeah, I haven't used TMT in
Yeah, it's been
10 years.
couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to have a virtual machine on my Mac just for the sole purpose of to run that tool. But I haven't even done that recently. It's been a long time.
so should we include, I mean, you just went through all the different tools and how there's no harmonization at all. They're all different in their aspect and their abstraction level, which is true. But do we want to indicate what type of a threat model this is? I mean, we have all sorts of different threat models. It's an umbrella term. So I could be modeling, doing an asset threat model where I'm showing all the different assets involved in the data flows between them. Okay. I could be doing process threat modeling where I've got services and processes that are pure software. And then on top of that, the approach can be different for each one of them. So I could be using fault tree or stride, or, do we want to indicate these sources? Is this going to help us? No, as we're ingesting these things.
I think we talked about that a while back. And I believe, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you were there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
But I believe the consensus was yes, we basically need to support. We need to support everything, not necessarily directly, but we needed to support regardless of methodology or lack thereof. Because if we go down the methodology route, we're going to box ourselves in really, really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, we said something about, yes, we still need the attributes, but we're not gonna make it, this is all the categories of stuff that you need for Stride, and this is all the stuff. It should be generic enough to change, but we still need some pointer on what we actually did.
Also for things like where it sits in your diagram. I don't want an XY coordinate on, for this particular bubble or this particular thing. It's like, all those details I think should definitely not be included. But just a sense of
what we
where
decided
did it come
on.
from? Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
So we decided that it was a call with me, Stephen DeVries, I don't know who else was on the call, but the consensus on that call was that there would be enough meta information in the model to be able to automatically generate a diagram, but that the diagram would not be necessarily included in the model.
Represented. Beautiful.
Right. So no XY coordinates or any of that.
Right. Beautiful.
And that's going to really bode well for tools like PyTM, which are largely focused on automation that don't have a diagram. It's more threat modeling as code type of stuff.
But does it generate? I still need to look into it again.
It generates a diagram.
It can generate,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, it does generate a diagram. PyTM does. Okay.
Yeah, it does. But the input is pure textual.
Yeah.
Right.
The reason it's why I don't use PyTM.
Right. Yeah. But it's Ezar's tool. I mean, it's one way to threat model, and I think we've all kind of concluded that there is no right or wrong way.
Now, so
it's a big tip. We got to be inclusive of all the different ways. That's all.
Yeah.
Big tip.
So does that answer your concerns or questions, Chris?
Yeah, but I think it needs to be in the model here somewhere of type. So we know what we're coming from.
Like, we talked about that too. And I don't think we had any decision on that, if I remember right. We talked about asset threat modeling and process threat modeling, and we talked about it, but we didn't
Yeah.
really,
No.
so
Yeah.
Kim and Chris, make a decision.
Yes, sure.
Obviously, I'm in favor.
Fantastic. Ship it.
Exactly, it's done.
All right. All right. So with that, maybe next week we can talk about the type of threat model.
Yeah.
We can talk a little bit about how we can capture the various aspects of Stride and Octave and Linden and all these different types of things without, putting walls around what we can and cannot do. I'm going to try to get a prototype mocked up of, my current level of thinking of how this could theoretically be implemented. Kim's going to go on vacation.
I hope so. I'm not sure yet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I've heard of those. They sound good.
Theoretically, yeah. Until you come back and realize that there's nobody there to do your work while you work.
Yeah.
So here's your list.
Whiteboarding, attack trees, Arcadia Stride, pasta, Linden.
I guess we will need more, but yeah.
Yeah. Cookbook, that's a new one.
Octave is one of those things that I don't know how they ever finish one. It seems
Right.
like, my career was centered around this one threat model. Okay, so I wouldn't include that. Okay, just because.
Yeah. Well, it's mentioned on the OWASP website, so I think it is. It used to be anyway.
Oh, this is actually, I cut and pasted. Ignore Arcadia and SysML. I cut it out of
I think they spelled Linden incorrectly though.
Yes.
Oh, I did. It's London. Oh, geez, that's my bad.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
fine.
that was you, Chris?
We
It's,
didn't
it's
really
the
think it
it's the
through.
British version. It's the British version of
Yeah,
Linden.
yeah,
It's called
exactly.
London.
Yeah,
Okay.
we should have thought it through more. It has 2 N's and 2 D's. It's just very
Yeah.
complicated as a
Yeah.
mnemonic, but yeah.
Yeah.
It is what
All
it
right.
is, so yeah.
All right, very
Thanks.
good. Well, good. I think this was a good call today. So thank you so much for your input. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Kim, for educating us on data privacy.
Happy
I
to.
feel more informed and terrified at the same time.
Okay.
So
We should get continuing education units for this here today.
absolutely. All right, all. I'll talk to you
right.
soon. Cheers.
Yes, see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.